Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk.
Hello and welcome to Light Talk. This is Stan, and I'm broadcasting from my state-of-the-art studio in the swamps of Gainesville, Florida.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas.
And this is David in Long Beach, California. And we are the Lumen Brothers. So guys, you believe that? This is episode 48.
No way, Jose! That's too long. What are we doing?
Okay, so do you know what episode 48 means?
It's the opposite of episode 84.
Which we'll probably hit next year sometime. Anyway, but it means that we are quickly approaching some very important milestones. They come in different areas. Obviously, our Facebook group page has exploded.
It's the Facebook page is a big airplane right now, 777.
Oh, that's right.
We're 777 as we speak. Yeah, we're 777s.
Wow, which means we're really close to 800, which means that we're closing in on 1,000.
Wait, let me double check that.
Okay, well, it'll change because this is going to come out in a few days, so there'll be a lot more than that. Yeah. But anyway, we have the Facebook members numbers. We have total downloads, which is really insane. The number of downloads.
How many? How much?
We're very close to the big 30. Not 30. That means 30,000. And also, we have pretty much conquered South Africa. We have, yes, it's pretty amazing. Actually, most of the continent of Africa, which is really surprising. My wife and I have a little competition to see who gets Africa first, because her podcast is going after Africa. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool. We've got, we've had Greenland for a while, and anyway, and also
Faroe
48 is close to 52, and do you know what 52 means?
It's the opposite of 25.
Yeah, yes, but what does 52? If we do this on a weekly basis, what does 52 mean?
That's the number of weeks in a year.
That's right. We are going to have our 1-year anniversary coming up.
Is there a cake coming? Is there a cake?
We are still planning this out, and we have staff. By the way, we've had the staff problem.
Did we hire somebody?
No, we have a problem with Light Talk Central staff. I mean, they're coming and they're going, and
turnover. We're churning.
It's just like the Trump administration,
right?
I think we're getting people. We're getting a lot of people from Washington. Let's just say that. Okay. So anyway, so they're working on it, but 52 means we're approaching our 1-year anniversary.
I really don't believe this has lasted this long.
Well, maybe it's all a dream. Coming up, we have a very special announcement. We cannot tell you what it is right now, but it is going to happen, and we're very, very excited about it.
You can't even tell me, right?
I can't tell anyone. So,
So why are you saying it?
It's a tease. It's something called a tease. So it keeps people listening.
Teaser.
Right.
Okay.
And, nothing better to do with their life but listen to us, really. I mean, come on. So anyway, we have that very special announcement coming up. We have our listener questions coming up here. And I have the first listener question. Ian Garrett from Toronto, Ontario asks, "Hey guys, would you be able to talk about the Prague Quadrennial?" Well, the Prague Quadrennial is pretty amazing.
What is it? I've not been there, so tell me what it is.
Every 4 years in Prague. Well, first of all, have you ever been to Prague?
No, I hear it's great.
Okay, Prague is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, and it's worth just going there. But what the Prague Quadrennial is a meeting of all these amazing artists, and it happens every 4 years. It started way back in 1967. And it's the world's largest event in the field of scenography. And there's a competitive area of this where people bring their contemporary work into the quadrennial, and it's scenography work. So it's anything that really has to do with theater design. You can see all different disciplines there of design, and you'll see it from all over the world. So it is really a place to go to just view of what's happening in the world in scenic design or scenography. So I think that's a really important thing. Now, I went years ago, and unfortunately, it's held usually during a time when I'm very busy, so I haven't been able to go back. But a lot of our students go, and I know USITT has something going on with them, and they always had. So I highly, highly recommend it. I have visited other quadrennials in the world. I know there's one in, actually, it's a Biennale. In Venice, and that was just amazing. I've seen a few of those, but yeah, I would highly recommend it. So the question is it worth it really? I mean, is this something you should do? Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you will get to see really what's on the cutting edge of design, and usually USITT or some other organizations will publish a lot of the exhibits. So you can actually, if you can't be there, you can actually see it. But hey, I can't think of a better tax write-off when it comes to research to, get a plane ticket and go, because you're going to be in probably what a lot of people consider the most beautiful city in the world, and you get to see that amazing work. What do you think, Steve?
So, Ian, let me. I have been, and my school does participate in the Prague Quadrennial. Let me put this in perspective. We just closed the Winter Olympics, right? So you saw that. Think of the Prague Quadrennial as the Olympics for art, for
Right.
performance. The last time this was done was back in 2015, so I can give you some information about that. In the 2015 Prague Quadrennial, the event lasted 11 days. There were 60 indoor and outdoor performance spaces all over Prague. There was, when I looked at the numbers on this, what the Prague Quadrennial says is that designers from 78 countries were present with their work. It had 180,000 viewers who came to see this, so it takes over the city of Prague. There were 1,300 students from all over the world who were taking part in workshops and performance and presenting their work. So it's a massive thing, which I suspect is why they can only do it every 4 years. David's right. You can go to the USITT website, and they have all kinds of information about the Prague Quadrennial. I kind of suspect you've already looked there and seen that. But also the Prague Quadrennial has a website up that really goes into fairly detail about how you might participate. If you do want to participate, I think the cutoff for submitting your application for the 2019 quadrennial, which will be the 15th, is May 1st. Oh, by the way, that is, it's the 14th Prague Quadrennial. And that is going to be taking place June 6th through June 16th in 2019. Okay, our next question comes from Katie in New York. I have just left graduate school. I'm assuming you graduated. And in New York City. At what point in your career did you stop taking electrician gigs and just concentrate on design? I need the income, but it seems a little dicey to keep doing both. Well, you're at an interesting point in your life. You've just left grad school. You're moving into a major market, and you're wanting to know how to make a living. I think realistically, when you get off the bus and you walk into New York, you're going to have to do some electrician gigs. You're going to have to do some assistant gigs. You're going to try to design. There's a lot of stuff going on there, so it's not like you've been doing this for a long time. But I would suggest that you want to kind of phase out being a stagehand as fast as you can. And the reason being is it's going to impact your work because people are going to start thinking of you as that go-to person who can design, hang, focus, run, and strike the show. And if you do that for too long, when they have simply, I need a designer, they won't think of you. They'll take your name off the list because they already have an electrician to do it. So it's a difficult dance you have to play. But I would phase out being a stagehand as quickly as you can and just simply concentrate on being a designer.
I think Steve nailed it exactly right. As fast as you can, or as long as you have to. You know, I was lucky. I was able to go home at night and had a place to live, you know, so I could sort of turn down stuff and start hunting for design work. And it's a hard one.
Well, what's going to happen is when a good design comes along, they just won't think of you.
Right.
They'll think
you get typecast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is always really tricky, you know. I mean, I was told by a very famous designer back when I was an assistant. He told me never take an electrician job. Now, I think that's a little too severe, but he was really serious about this. And he said you will be immediately branded as a technician and not as an artist. Now, that was his words. I don't know if I agree with that, only because I know a lot of, you know, great electricians who are also artists. Okay?
Right.
And that happens. I guess you just have to look at it. Now, one thing I was thinking about what Steve was saying about going to New York. I think you need to avoid something because there's this view of New York as being the only place to make it, right? We've talked about this on the show. I guess my advice is don't be Joe Buck in Midnight Cowboy on that bus going into Manhattan. And for those who have not seen Midnight Cowboy, it's about this guy from Texas, a young man from Texas who thinks he can make a living in New York, and he has all these, you know, glorious dreams, and he gets off and he steps off into reality. And it's basically a story about reality hitting this guy right in the face. So I think that you need to do what you can do to survive. I wouldn't recommend going Joe Buck's way or Ratso Rizzo's way, but I do think it's important to try to stay in the entertainment field. And I think this is why a lot of us in our schools also teach architectural lighting. We teach the skills that you will need to get jobs, you know, like AutoCAD and Revit and, you know, and programming and things like that. I think you're much better off getting work as a programmer than as like a technician, an electrician on stage.
I think you're right. I was going to say, and Steve had brought this up on a prior show, that the programmer is sort of, somebody asked a question about, you know, I forget what the question was exactly, but Steve made the point that now it's, you know, having that programmer, having that second person helping you make the art is really powerful, and that's a really great thing to do. I would certainly lean towards that rather than swinging a wrench and hanging a light. If you want to be you're working closely with the designer.
Yeah, and if you do decide to take the programming route, buy your own console, and I'll tell you why. Because
why, David?
Now Steve is being me. He's jumping in.
Why, David? I'll tell you why. Because a lot of your first jobs, you're going to be working for companies that don't have a lot of money. And they are going to rather hire a programmer who can bring their own console with them than to actually pay a lot of money to rent a console. Now, you can also roll that rental fee into your fee, but I think that will give you a heads up. And consoles now are inexpensive enough for you to buy your own. Plus, you'll learn it a lot better.
It's a good point. I have a former student who did exactly that. And would provide his design services and the console, and then they would pay him. That would be part of the package, and increased his revenue quite a bit.
Well, most professional programmers own their own consoles, and they own multiple consoles as backup. And because they actually make a lot of money renting their consoles, you know, to the as part of their fee. So you could do it on a much smaller scale with the less expensive console, but even, you know, small consoles that you can buy for, you know, several $1,000s, you could pretty much handle almost any rig. It may not be as versatile as an EOS or a Grand MA, but you could still get away with the 90% of what you want to do, you know, with maybe a used Ion or something like that.
Right.
So I think that'd be a great way of going.
JC in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania asks, do you think large-scale lighting and media production is getting out of hand in worship facilities? Well, I'm probably not the best person to answer this question, but I'll just say, like, generally, I don't go to church. So let me take a historical perspective on this question. So once upon a time,
tell us about the Bible and about
like
Adam
a little,
and Eve.
No, like a little theater
It's
history.
a biblical thing. Okay.
A little theater history. So when the church was trying to spread the gospel in Europe, right? I remember my theater history. The idea was that most people were illiterate and they couldn't read the Bible. So these spectacles were made, right, to basically these allegories to tell the stories. And so the spectacles got so spectacular, this has happened before, that eventually the church became concerned that the spectacle was becoming more of the attraction than the gospel. And so that all got thrown out of the church, right? And then all of a sudden it wasn't there. And now it's back again. So now the church is using spectacle to, share the gospel. So I think it probably does get out of hand. If let's put it this way. If the spectacle is overshadowing the message of whatever institution it is, then you're sort of losing it. Even in a play, if the spectacle gets in the way of the story, of the humanity of the story that's being told, then that's over the top too. So is it or isn't it? I don't know, but I think if you're asking the question, it probably is for you.
I do have something to say about this since I write for a worship design magazine.
I knew you would. I'm anxious to hear your perspective.
Which I guess I can plug the magazine. It's Church Production Magazine. I've written for them for many, many years, and actually I'm on their technical advisory board. So I have to put all that out right front. But I've also consulted on a lot of houses of worship. And, Stan, thank you for telling that great story because you're absolutely correct. I totally agree with you when you said that it's the same in theater. If the spectacle is overshadowing the message and not supporting the message, then there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Now, to answer the question directly, with the amount of technology that's happening, and I have seen some amazing houses of worship with huge amounts of technology, both in lighting and sound and video. They have their own control rooms, the editing. It's just unbelievable. So everything I have seen, I must tell you, I find it actually rather tasteful. I believe that people, and again, this is a blanket statement, and again, I'm generalizing, but I believe that people who design for worship activities are very sensitive to the message. And, we all want to wow, they all want to have, the better lighting system than, the church down the street. But when it comes down to the actual presentation, I find most of the worship design I have seen actually very, very supportive of the word. So, can it get out of hand? Absolutely. Does it? I haven't, not in my experience very often.
Well, you are listening to Light Talk with Steve, Stan, and David, and we are the Lumen Brothers. And this week, Light Talk is sponsored by...
Hey, a year ago, we introduced to our listeners the Juice Hose, Juice Hose Jr., and the Never Trip Breaker. Well, today, the Tonry Electric Company of West Virginia now give us the Sit-a-Spell focus tool. Its name says it all, Sit-a-Spell, the preferred focus tool of stagehands throughout Dixie. I own 3, one for school, one for home, and one for the car. The Sit-a-Spell focus tool's main feature is a bottle opener, because you never know when you're going to need one. The Sit-a-Spell focus tool will open craft, domestic, and all those uppity European beers with ease. Not only that, but it also works with classic pull-tab brews such as Natural Ice Light, Michelob Ultra, and Milwaukee's Best. Why? Because you're a stagehand, my friend, and you can't afford good stuff. The Sit-a-Spell's focus tool is unique in that its fixed position jaws fit all the nuts and bolts on every major lighting fixture, foreign and domestic. Just not very well. But it keeps the manufacturing costs low. So after an hour of slow, frustrating work, you're going to be ready for an icy brew. Did I mention it's also a bottle opener? The Sit-a-Spell focus tool, perfect for summer stock, rodeos, and state fairs. So when all those Yankee stagehands can't open that bottle of Shiner, just say, well, bless your heart, and lend a hand. The Sit-a-Spell focus tool is not compatible with Asian beers, but who cares? Sit-a-Spell.
I got to say something here, because I lived in Texas for many years, and wasn't it true, and I'm sure it's not the case now, but many years ago, I believe it was legal to drink a beer and drive. I really do. I when I was in
Maybe
grad
in your
school,
mind it was.
No, I sort of remember this in the 70s. Like, you're not going to take the right of me drinking a good beer on the day. And I think as long as your alcohol level is low, you could drink a beer, and it's probably the same now.
Well, I think it depends on the day. I mean, if it's 110 degrees out there, who's going to find you in the wrong?
No one.
For having a nice cold beer. Now, if it's a winter day, you're cruising down the road. The cop may say, "I don't know about that," but clearly, you need a Sit-a-Spell focus tool.
Absolutely, I love it.
Got to get one. And now, back to Light Talk. So we have a subject today for your consideration that we're just going to discuss a little bit, because since we all teach as well, should we be designing at our schools? Is the question that's sort of that was burning this morning, and I'll just say yes and no. And I think there's two sides to this coin. One, we never really we got into teaching because we're there for the students and to give them opportunity and to mentor them and help them grow, and we certainly don't want to take away those opportunities from them. On the other hand, it's good to model professional behavior and let them see how you work and work closely with you, and for you to be in that role. Sometimes I really, if it depends on the school you're at too. If you're at a small school and your opportunities, which I've done as well as being at a big school, and the opportunities for you to go out and do a lot of work get limited, then maybe your only opportunity to design and or showcase your talent is at your school. On the other hand, if you're at a big university and you're required to do research and creative activity, the work you do on campus doesn't really have the same weight as the work you do off campus. So, and I try to take students with me. In fact, if I do a production off campus, I'm almost exclusively will take a student with me, and they can see me working in that context, because there's a different set of expectations when I'm working as a professional than when I'm working in school. I'm really still wearing the teacher hat. I'm a role model. And when I'm out there, it's like, there's no time for learning. It's a professional environment. So I think it depends on where you are, what you're doing, and what the circumstances are. What do you guys think?
Well, for many, 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 many years, I have always believed that teachers should not be designing at school. Okay, and I just was feeling just the places where I was working, we had enough grad students. I still have enough grad students that they could, these are opportunities for them, and, they're enough to cover all the shows. My students usually design, program, and usually assist at least one show a semester. We do enough shows that they can do that. And I have enough students that they could do that. I don't believe the schools are a place for my creative work. On the other hand, is exactly what Stan said. I think it's important for students to see their mentors work, to see them work in a situation where they are applying professional techniques. Now that goes into the other consideration of, is a school trying to recreate the profession, or as far as productions are concerned, or are they safe laboratories for students to try things and to fail, and to fail safely? Mm-hmm. That's a discussion that the school, the department needs to have about, how to treat the productions as laboratory experiences. Now, I will never forget a story, and it happened at a school I was working at, where I had a student lighting designer on a show, and it was completely student designed, and we had a sophomore stage manager calling the show. And on opening night, I'll never forget this. The stage manager made a few errors. Okay, she forgot to call one cue, and things got a little rough. But that happens, right? The next day, the chair of the department called me in and asked me why these mistakes were being made. Why this student, this 19-year-old student who's taking stage management class, missed these cues. And I asked the chair, what are your expectations for these students when they're working in laboratory environments? And the chair said, well, I expect them to be at professional quality. I'll never forget it. That they have to be at this local regional theater. I'm not being detailed because then you'll know what school I'm talking about. And I got really upset. And I said, on opening night last night, you had 2 actors who skipped a whole bunch of text. They skipped a bunch of lines. Do you have those same expectations for the actors? Silence. So I think, as a department, we all have to be on the same page about exactly why these productions are happening, what type, what expectations we all have for these quality for the productions.
I really want to expand this question to something larger. And so all these productions at school, whether we're dance and theater, are going to have a lead director or a choreographer, and they are faculty. And the bigger question is, and I think this trickles down to David's point about, is it a laboratory or is it a professional situation? If the faculty member who is directing or choreographing the work, if that work is viewed as their professional creative activity, okay, then they are going to self-identify with that product as like a traditional academic who is publishing a book or writing a peer-reviewed paper. That is a problem because
that is a problem.
Okay,
big problem.
Right, because then all of a sudden, the work that the students are providing as part of their education is wrapped up in the professional quality of what that academic director or choreographer is doing, and then it's not about the students learning; it's about their show.
That's right.
Which then they present in their dossier for promotion and tenure or whatever as their work. So of course they want the highest quality. Now that's not to say that we don't want our students to produce the best quality work they're capable of, but in an educational environment. And I often like to say, when we reflect on the work of a student, it's not how good was it, it's how much did you learn through the process and grow. So, and again, I'll go back to my point, but it depends on where it is. So if you're at a research university that has the resources to give you time, to send you off campus, to let you go and work somewhere else, that's where you ought to be getting that credit, not teaching the students on the stage how to act or helping the designers design. But I think it's sort of a beast in the sense that people like us can go away for a week or two maybe and go design a production where the faculty in who are directing or choreographing can't really go away for 4 weeks or 5 weeks for a rehearsal period. So it's hard. So I think it's really a rock in a hard place problem, but the student gets caught in that. And so we do argue that it's about the students learning, but at the same time, the faculty, when their identity is wrapped up in that work, unless you're bringing in a professional director, it's a tough one.
Yeah. I think that is really the key. I've had faculty members actually say that to me, in other situations, not where I'm at right now, because our RTP documents completely remove any work at school as part of their RISCA, which is Research and Scholarly Creative Activities. But I've had, in the past, they've said, hey, your lighting designer is screwing up my show, and my show, and it's always my show, right? It's
correct.
My show.
That's the language that's used,
and that drives me
show.
crazy. It's all right, it's everybody's show, It's ridiculous, right. But anyway, right. and that's why we removed it. That was one of the main reasons why we removed it from the tenure documents.
Well, and one way to dance around it is to say, well, the creative work that you do on campus has less weight than the creative work than you do.
It's still creative work.
Well, it's right. But still, that student or that question about safe to fail or students to learn or the expectations that doesn't take that away. It doesn't take that problem away. The problem that you have raised with this for your consideration question. So and also I also found when I design at school, it's sort of like I'm designing in the cracks. I'm designing between meetings, I'm designing between classes, I'm designing between all kinds of other things. When I go away and I'm a guest artist, all I'm there to do is design, and I love that. So I think I get better work when I'm not doing it on campus. But if I can take the student with me, then it's terrific.
Well, I think the cautionary tale here is, again, buyer beware. I think if you're a student and you have to do a little research. I think if you attend a university, be it small or be it large, and you want to be a theatrical designer, and the season is designed by the faculty there, you need to leave that school.
Right.
You need to say, okay, I learned some stuff, but this is not where I'm going to stay. If you're applying for graduate school and the bulk of the season is designed by faculty, you need to go someplace else. You need to go where you can develop your skill sets, where there's faculty willing to mentor you, but also where there is a community, and it starts, I guess, with the dean or the department chair, that this is a laboratory situation. And you are allowed to be a student, and with that, you're allowed to succeed, and you're allowed to fail. I think the pros of having a faculty member design a show is certainly we do learn by imitation. We can see the process they go through. I think clearly the con on that is that it's taking away opportunities for students. The question is, how do we want to put groups of people together to produce art? So, it comes down to that question, who is directing? And, at my school, we do 7 theater shows a year. 4 are directed by faculty, 3 are directed by student. And if we can, they are 100% designed by students. The only time the faculty becomes involved in designing a show here is if there is an emergency, if a student had to leave the program or we cut a student from the program. But we are actively trying to have our students design everything here. If for no other reason, they're working with people their age, particularly on the shows that are directed by students. You're working with a peer group, and that group is going to make a journey together, and perhaps that journey continues once you graduate. It's very different if you're a student working for a faculty director. No matter what they say, there is that relationship of faculty and student, and you're never going to be part of that peer group. So that's a different dynamic, but it's still an important dynamic that you're working with someone that you have to treat slightly differently. And frankly, when you leave and you go into the profession and you're working with a friend of yours, that's one relationship. If you're working with some super hot director who can pick anyone in the world, that relationship is going to be different too. You're not going to be on an equal footing with that person. So I encourage universities to let students design, and that comes with good news and bad news. But that's what a university is in the business of doing, is training people to do this profession. I mean, we see it on the PhD level all the time. On the PhD level, those departments who are offering doctorates are more than happy to let PhD students teach a class. And that comes with good and bad too. You can have an outstanding PhD student in there offering a great curriculum, and you can have another PhD student who is quite terrible at what they're doing. But the mission there is to help them learn how to be an educator on many levels. So the same way they try to mentor those PhD students, then we have an obligation on the MFA level to put our students in the same situation or similar situation and mentor them. There's only so many things you can learn by reading a book. You do have to be engaged at some point.
Our last question is from Todd in Chicago. I am struggling a bit. When I look at my work, a lot of it seems cliche. What might I be doing wrong?
What is cliche?
I am going to take it that Todd is talking about cliche in the sense of it seems old, it seems used, it seems, that we've seen this before, or he's seen it before in his own art. I can relate to this in the sense that sometimes, you start using the same angles, and there's some angles that I love using, and there's some fixtures I put there where I always put. And then I write a cue, and of course that light is throwing a shadow up on that stage left wall, and I've done that 100 times before. And maybe it's cliche because maybe a better angle or a more daring angle would be much more interesting, but I know this works. Maybe that's safe. I don't know if it's cliche, whatever. Anyway, what you might be doing wrong is not opening yourself as an artist and just expanding your art and trying different things. Now, it's a little different when you're a student and you do have that ability to refocus lights and to, try things and fail, and you don't have to worry about being at a 4-hour crew call, to get 100 cues written. So maybe sometimes you do things that are going to work. But if you're in a much more flexible situation with less pressure, absolutely. Try a different color. Try something new. And think out of the box. I mean, look at the play as a new type of movement that you're going to create, a new type of piece of music, and use a different instrument. Instead of using an oboe, use a piano there, just for the hell of it. That I have found, in my own work, that is how I break out of that sort of cliche type of or old type of design process.
Well, I looked up cliche to get the precise definition, and according to the internet, it says cliche, a phrase or opinion that is overused and betrays a lack of original thought. So I think, if you're doing this a long time, or any art, there's stuff that works, like David said. There's only, maybe there's only so many angles that one can put a light, but there's a lot of places you can put a light in a box or whatever shape your theater is. And I think, right.
And you got drone focus deluxe too.
They got drone focus deluxe now, right? So the focuses can be dynamic. I guess David's point is right. It's like you do have to push yourself, and maybe one way is to see other people's work and see what they're doing. Wow, I never thought of that, right? Or to just kick stuff that you do all the time to the curb and start fresh. And just it's sort of like this thing we talked about episodes ago about, to be an artist, you sort of have to be fearless. Right? Be willing to try something or do something you haven't done before. And I think that's one way to break out of it.
Well, I think when you look at cliche is the color blue if it's sad on stage. Cliche is red if it's angry. Cliche is pink if it's a comedy. Mm-hmm. How do you escape cliche? I think it's through thoughtful research, meaningful design conversations, and honest hard work about thinking through the production. It sounds to me like you're phoning it in. You've got one light plot and you simply change the title block on it. And if you're doing that, you're just being lazy. Or you're not doing your job as a designer. Design is hard work. Designers are problem solvers. That's what we do. David's right. You have to push yourself to explore new colors, new ideas about gobos, new equipment. Are you creating a world for the play, or are you just putting some light on the stage? I'm not quite as bitter as are you designing a show or systems, but it sounds like you found something that's comfortable, it works, you put it in all of your shows, and there you go, and you wondering, maybe why you're not moving up the food chain as a designer. It's because you're not taking any risks.
That's a good point. That's my point about fearlessness. Take risk. Try it.
And don't be afraid to throw it out. I mean, sometimes I'll throw that moving light down left and down right on the deck to get that diagonal up light, and I don't use it because it's wrong for the show.
It's hard because I don't know you and I don't know your work. But I would say try to be invisible. Mm-hmm. I think you can go and see an incredible rock and roll show and the lighting designer's work is invisible. You can go to a ballet or a theater or opera or go to a movie and that work is invisible. And you sit in that world, whether it's rock and roll or cinema or theater, and you're totally immersed into the environment of the show. And yeah, you're having a great sensory experience, but you don't leave the theater talking about a strobe, or you don't leave the theater talking about a kangaroo gobo, or you don't, cliche. That's Hamlet in his graveyard speech, and everything goes blue, and there's a white, downlight on him. I mean, that's cliche. How do you make it different?
Bring in a mirror ball.
How do you, it's, well, maybe, but, cliche is also the expected.
Yep.
And I think one of the things I tell my students, and, you put this in your cookbook, is your first idea is almost always the wrong idea.
Right.
Your first idea is almost always the cliche idea. And I argue one clean, simple idea for the show. What is that one clean, simple idea? And keep going back to that idea and let the action drive that idea and your idea support the action. So that's how you're not cliche.
That's a great answer. Hey guys, that Hammond organ solo in the background tells us that once again, you've spent a precious 40 minutes of your life listening to Light Talk. Look for the next episode of Light Talk here on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Spotify, or the Light Talk Facebook group page. And while you are there, post your comments and questions, and be sure to subscribe to Light Talk.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
In other words, what Steve is saying is, please don't burn down your theater.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And don't forget, keep those questions coming. You can email us at David, Stan, or Steve at lighttalk.org.
And be sure to tune in next week when we feature an interview with our good friend from Elation Professional, Eric Loader.
All that and a new sponsor. Light Talk is coming to you every Saturday. Every Saturday.
We'll see you all next week. Same time, same channel. Bye-bye.
From Light Talk. Bye-bye, everybody.